we start, or are you safe to?
Thanks for sending you guys.
Yeah, can I just say one word right at the top? Yeah, just maybe more than one. I just want to introduce everyone to Ella Capon. She is our new paralegal. She's filling the shoes of Benedetta Pelerano, who was our former paralegal. Ella she's not even been here for a full week, and she's going to be helping to work on the Recovery Council and opioids and other stuff. So I think you'll be seeing more of Ella as we in the council and our office move forward with this work. And so I just wanted to welcome her and introduce her. And I'll do this again on Tuesday for everybody else.
Well, welcome, Ella, to the group.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I will officially call the meeting of the Executive Committee for the Recovery Council to order. And thank you all for coming, and thank you for the small mishap that we had in regards to which meeting it was in. I welcome all that are there and watching via the YouTube, and note that we like the fact that people care about the work that we do and have an input in that. So we have basically what I'm looking at. I'm going to add one thing to the agenda, but the two things that are on the agenda was one, to discuss the consultant contract with Dr. Kim Johnson, and then go into executive session to discuss the Recovery Council coordinator position and the applicants that are there. But we will do that in executive session. So does anyone else have anything to add to the agenda?
Pat, are we going to add the survey issue?
Yeah, the one thing will be added to the agenda is the survey. So okay. The two things we have to discuss before we go into executive session are the survey and Dr. Johnson's contract. All right, does anyone have a preference in order which we choose those? If not, I'm going to go with the survey first. So we have been requested by the survey that the work is done with the survey and it's all complete. And Liz sent us all an email in regarding a request from the executive committee. And basically it was the concern that about language, and that we needed to translate the survey into different languages so that we could get input from those who English was not their primary language, which you'll note was discussed it was not voted, but was discussed in our last full meeting, that it was probably a necessary step for us to take. And that request was to pay for it to be translated for $4,515. And then there was a second request from Liz for $1,500 to help pay for Qualtrics. Is that how you pronounce it? Which would be a company that would actually work and get the survey out and tabulated for us. And she has a timeline. And so she asked if the executive committee would vote on those expenditures. And Brandon can tell you a little bit more about that. My concern was we can vote on whether to push those through. My concern was, does the executive committee have the authority to allocate these funds? And can we do that in order for contracts and bills to be paid on just the vote of the executive committee, or does it have to go to full board? And again, it's one of those things, it's a learning lesson for all of us. So that's what's open for discussion right now in regards to paying these bills. Brendan?
In terms of the committee's authority, for the record, under the bylaws of the council, so let me back up. There's nothing in the bylaws that gives the chair or the treasurer or anybody else, specific authority to spend, below a certain amount of money, without the full council's authority. There's actually, I don't think there's anything in the bylaws that actually has any language about how the council makes decisions about specific expenditures, other than the default of just voting on things. So, whether the council wants to, in the future, add something to the bylaws to authorize like small dollar expenditures, I think that's probably a good idea to consider. In the meantime, the executive committee, under Article 6.3 of the bylaws, has, quote, the authority of the council for the management of the council between meetings of the council, with certain exceptions, most of which have to do with, if they're doing something, if this committee is doing something that it knows to be contrary to the wishes of the council. Now, this project to issue a survey to the public and to have it translated is known to the council, and I just want to talk briefly about the support, the extent to which there's support for it in past council meetings. There hasn't been a vote by the council to say, yes, please go ahead with the survey, and there hasn't been a vote of anything about, spending money for the survey, but there have been statements at the last two council meetings about the survey. In the August meeting, Liz Blackwell Moore updated the council about her progress putting the survey together, and does talk about having the survey translated. And then in the September meeting, there was a discussion, including by Gordon and Chastity and Kenna and Bruce and Pat and some others about moving forward with the survey. And I can go through, kind of what specifically those discussions were, but it was generally, I would characterize the statements, and other, the public and others can watch the video of the September meeting, but I would generally categorize the statements as supportive of this project. In particular, there was a statement, Chastity said at some point that the survey should be in multiple languages, and Pat, you echoed that. And Pat, you then asked Liz to lead the survey project. So I think there isn't a specific vote, but there's support for the survey that was voiced by the council in the past two meetings. All that said, I think, the case can be made, or I can support the idea that certainly the council supports the survey, the council supports the need to have it translated. I would, in general, I would prefer that there be either a provision in the bylaws, of the sort of small dollar authorization, or that, the council, that we wait a week until the next council meeting for the vote. Having said that, I can support and can find support for this committee authorizing the payment of these dollar amounts. I would recommend that this committee, if it chooses to authorize that, then seek to have it ratified at the next council meeting next Tuesday. Because the public and the council and others across the state really want, to see forward movement on things like the survey, I think the council's got support or this committee has support for moving the survey project forward by spending these monies. And so, that on those two things, we've got the $4,500 for translation. I think there's definitely support for that. On the issue of, the software, I don't know if I'm describing that correctly, Qualtrics or the web platform or whatever it is, for disseminating the survey and processing the survey. There's an issue about should this, there's an issue about, apparently you need to have a subscription or an account to make use of that software. Apparently it's on an annual basis. Annual membership is represented by Liz Blackwell Moore as costing $1,500. I understand, Courtney's organization has an account with Qualtrics.
Yeah.
And the alternative, so we have two options, at least. One is the council relies on, Courtney's organization to do that, or that the council, or more administratively, the AG's office, buys a membership for $1,500 for the purposes of getting this survey out the door. And I think, the second issue about Qualtrics is the only part of this that I feel like there needs to be some discussion about. But, I want to open it up or, defer to others for discussion on that issue or other issues.
So I just wanted to jump in for a second. I offered up to, so background, Qualtrics is a platform that administers surveys. You build out surveys. It's a research platform. It's well used across the research industry for a long time. So it's a really great platform. We do have it because of my background in research. That being said, I offered it up quickly thinking that it would expedite the process. And then after a little bit of time thinking about it, I've actually decided that it's not a good idea for me to offer that up. And I think that this council should just spend the money to have it because it's a really great platform. And we're going to want to do multiple surveys probably throughout the course of this council's existence.
I think, Courtney, thank you for that. When it's nice that you, I think, offered it, but I have to agree that it probably it's probably not the best that your organization do that. It's just the perception of things. And as
I also don't want to be responsible for analyzing that data. That survey is going to be an extensive survey to analyze. Somebody should probably be paid to do that.
Yeah, it will be. So, but thank you for the offer. But I think for conflict of interest and a couple ethics things, I think it's best that either we make the decision to purchase it or not. Other comments about this?
Well, if I can weigh in, I guess briefly, everything Brendan said was spot on. The council, I thought, was exceedingly clear that they wanted to do the survey. In fact, they wanted to do it yesterday. And the fact that it hasn't happened yet is, it's kind of like, I don't want to say it's a frustration, but I think people were very supportive of, yes, we need to do a survey. And if the way to get that survey done expeditiously is to use Qualtrics, and Courtney, I'll listen to you because I'm not in that world, then that's what we should be doing. And I think the executive committee has the responsibility to move this along. That's what executive committees do. We're the middle of the, we're in between and we keep things moving along.
On that note, I would like to put forward a motion. Did I cut you off, Ben?
No, go ahead.
Okay, I'd like to put forward a motion that the executive committee approve these two transactions, one for the translation of services and one for the Qualtrics, with the caveat that we'll get a ratification from the council next week.
And specifically that the council or that effectively the council acquires a annual membership or whatever it is in the Qualtrics program or software or platform. Is that
Yes.
right? Okay.
Subscription, I think it's called. I'll second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there further discussion on this motion?
I just want to, I'm supportive of it in general. I agree that we should be moving things forward, and I also don't think, I think we should talk a little bit about just the process by which we're going to have to make expenditures, because it takes a while to do things in the state, so I don't even know if anything's going to happen in the next week, but we can discuss that, because, but I think it is the motion on the table, we're going to move it forward and then also sort of belts and suspenders do a vote at the council meeting as well.
Yes,
Right.
yes. Which I think I had a discussion with Brendan. My concern always is I always think about audits. And so if an auditor looked at an expense, where was the vote from the council? And so where we have lack of procedure in regards to financial expenditures, I think with the vote of this board, with the executive committee, plus the vote that comes with the full council, I think it would pass that audit test that the expenditures were in agreement with everyone there. And we do believe the expenditures fall within the guidelines of the MOUs and all the other things attached to that. But I do agree, I think, Ben, you're right. It's one of those things that we have to look at our procedures moving forward as to how we determine expenses and allocate those expenses.
Yeah, I mean, because I just in general, the costs are non-material, and they are important since we're in like the sort of the phase of our work to establish priorities and figure out input from the people of Maine. So, and this is going to directly support that effort. I do, but then on the other hand too, I just want, you know, it is somewhat precedential. It's the first money that we're spending, and want to make sure that we sort of paper it after the fact on exactly what the executive council can and cannot do, and how, if we want to provide more flexibilities for the executive council, things like that.
Thank you, Ben. There's no other further discussion. Can we have to call a roll because we're on Zoom. So Haley, can I ask if you can call a roll to vote, please?
Yep. Betsy Fitzgerald,
Yes,
Courtney Gary Allen,
Yes.
Pat Kimball,
Yes.
Ben Mann.
Yes.
Technically,
Motion-
Eric's supposed to be here, so it's not like
Yeah,
unanimous.
I do need to announce it again, procedure. Eric, for those who don't know, is on a leave. He's actually at a training out of state for 2 months. And so he will not be in attendance to any of the council functions until December. I believe it's the first week in December, I think he comes back, but he has taken a leave because of training. So that's why he's not here today. But the motion carries, and I thank you very much for the discussion. And I think people will be happy because I think you're all right. The council is looking forward to this survey, and Liz certainly has done an amazing job at getting that out and moving forward. And soon we'll see some results. So thank you very much. All right, so
I do have because this is what I do in my regular job. So the AG shop going to take care of this? I presume you're going to use a P card or something and work with Liz to get an account and somehow charge it over to the Recovery Council?
That's right, yep.
Great.
and promise, yeah, just do one quick thing to remember. Sometimes when people on boards set these stuff up, they put it in their name versus make sure that everything is in the Attorney General's name in that way, because if it gets a private person's name on it, sometimes it's hard to get off.
So just for clarity, you know, there's a couple of things. One is like, I'm not familiar with Qualtrics. You know, you know, we're going to move forward with this, assuming that my office can do this. If I run into any administrative difficulties, you know, I'll certainly let everybody know as quickly as possible. My second thing is that my expectation is that this would be work that would be turned over to the coordinator as soon as that person is established. But for now, it'll be, you know, my expectation is to be housed in, you know, the account will probably be owned by our office just because that's how it works. And that, you know, the council will direct, you know, how the account gets used until that coordinator is established. And the last thing is, I just want to say that this expenditure for both the survey translation and for this Qualtrics membership or subscription, in my view, I can find support for it in the approved uses under Schedule B, Section J, under Leadership Planning Coordination, which generally talks about supporting efforts to, you know, identify root causes of addiction, goals for reducing harms, populations with the greatest needs, things like that. It's just worth identifying the support for this being an approved use under the MOU for the for the council.
Thank you. All right, if there's no other further discussion on this survey and the expenditures, I'm going to move that we move to the discussion on Dr. Kim Johnson and the contract. I believe you all should have gotten the draft contract that Brendan has sent all of you, and this is your opportunity to ask questions in regard to this.
And as I said, work through this internally. I haven't shared it with Dr. Johnson. Once I get feedback from this group, then, I would share it with Dr. Johnson in terms of, and I think as I flagged, some of the questions that I have are about the timing of deliverables, which I think Dr. Johnson has to weigh in on, as well as the sort of staggering of the proposed payments. Again, the proposal is for 1,600, and I just put in placeholders for both the timing and for the payments.
Can I just a couple questions? I think the scope, is the scope of the project unchanged from what Dr. Johnson?
Dr. Johnson.
Submitted to the council? Like 2 and 3 always said facilitation of a process of a council development first year spending plan.
I mean, I don't know, Pat, you can, or anybody else, you should weigh in. I'm not aware of it being changed, but you should weigh in.
So it was my understanding that the deliverables, what she proposed, were the same. If I remember correctly, the conversation that went at the board meeting was different board members or different council members had different views as to what they saw as the key. Like, for instance, and I think Dr. Johnson said it at one point, like her first thing was collecting data, and people said, well, data isn't probably our thing. But Kim didn't put them as the deliverables in order. She basically put them there as these are what she could produce for us. And so there was a lot of discussion in regards to importance of what they saw it, but there wasn't an objection in any way that I saw or I heard that her current deliverables that she presented were not what the council wanted. And if I'm not mistaken, but we're willing to discuss that. And if someone can pull up those deliverables that Kim presented to us.
Yeah, I'm trying to do that right now.
It should
I
be in
have
the
'em.
packet next to you there.
I can read them if that's helpful. The deliverables that she presented, and I don't believe it was any particular order, but were 1, initial data report, presentation, discussion of findings, and revision of report design based on council member feedback. 2, facilitation of process of council development of first year spending plan. 3, facilitation of process of designing a decision-making process. That's a lot of processes. 4, long-term strategic planning. 4, development of a management process to include how contracts grantees will be selected, funds distribution mechanisms, and ensuring that funds are being spent as intended, and the process to address problems with contracts/grantees. It's a lot of processes. So my memory of the conversation was, I agree with you, Pat, there probably wasn't a straight objection to deliverable 1, but there was a lot of conversation about how we didn't want to spend any more time talking about what the problem was, and focusing more on actually facilitating the process that the council is going to have to make our priorities. I think that, at least for me, speaking as an individual counselor, that's the most important thing. As soon as we've had the public hearing and we have the survey, I would like this council and hopefully Dr. Johnson to be able to facilitate the conversation about what are our collective priorities.
So I had a brief conversation with Kim since the board meeting in regards to putting the contract together. And Kim heard that. Again, I can't speak for Kim. I can only tell you what my conversation was with her. in regards to that is exactly what she heard, Courtney, from the group, was that, she was going to present some data to us and some of the research that she found, but she heard really loud and clear that the council really wants to start setting their priorities. They want to listen to the public. They want to hear what the public says, as well as spending time developing their own sense of priority. If I remember right, Paul was very clear at the council meeting. He wanted to have that conversation with the council members there. And I think Kim heard that, and it is one of her intentions in her deliverables. And I don't know whether you want to put it in the contract or not, but one of her intentions is to have an entire meeting talking about the priorities and making the vision of that council come forward.
Just as a quick follow-up, that's wonderful. Thank you for having that conversation with her.
Yeah, she heard a lot.
I'm curious, around a deliverable 1, speaking to the survey, that survey is a monster of a survey. And the analysis of that survey is going to take somebody some time. And I'm curious if maybe, I think she would be very well suited to do that work. And I don't know who we're going to hire as a coordinator, but that survey is going to take a little more than just a bachelor's degree in art or whatever we hire somebody to do. So I'm curious if she would be willing to take on some of the analysis of the Qualtrics survey.
I can't speak for Dr. Johnson. I can tell you that if you're asking her to analyze that survey, she may say that it is not within the scope of what she's saying in this contract and may charge us a little more money. I don't know. I mean, it'd be worth asking her for. I can't answer that, whether she considers that extra work besides what she's already put before us.
Yeah, so Pat, there's more detail about what that first deliverable is in the first paragraph on the first page under proposal,
Yeah.
which is, using existing data to create a report, providing, information that answers the question regarding who's dying, where they're dying, how they're dying, to inform the council on the strategies that will address the specific issues in Maine, including where resources are already deployed, and to identify gaps the council can fill. So in terms of like what she's analyzing, it sounds like that's, she's looking at the data the state already has. Whether she will take on additional analysis, I think we'd have to ask her, keeping in mind that, as she identified at the meeting, she's sort of term limited because she can only do this through the end of the year, as I understand it.
So I'm curious, could we swap those two things out? Because the council really needs somebody to look at that survey, and it's become a priority for us. So instead of, not on top of.
For me, I would have a problem with that. And that's just me, it's just one person. I know the survey is important, but I have no idea the quality or how much survey that was. I would, Dr. Johnson is a researcher, but the survey was something that was not discussed with her. And I would hate at this point, again, it's just me, to switch gears in regards to what she's proposed. But again, I'm having a conversation without her here, so I don't know what she thinks about it.
I like the idea of including it. I think it is going to take some work, and everyone has a full-time job. This is the only dedicated capacity that we have that we're onboarding. I think the worst that can happen, we can propose to include it, and she can say no. And it might take an extra day or something to do that. I think it fits within the deliverables already, and I think it was based on a question that I asked her at the time. She explicitly said that she could dial up or dial down. I think she could emphasize or de-emphasize was the language that she used on certain deliverables. And this, I think, the facilitation of the process to get at council priorities, it feels like I see buckets, right? Like I'm envisioning, like she's gonna take a look at the data and come up with gaps, like just like the language that Brendan just said. We're gonna have a process with council members and discuss what we think our priorities are. We're gonna have a public forum, or that's gonna be an input to establish our priorities. And I think the survey analysis is also an input, so it's sort of all different elements to try to arrive at this first year spending plan and long-term strategic planning. I think which are the deliverables of this. So I'd be in favor of including it, whether it's number 5 or just as, we can put it as I don't think it has to take, I don't think, a few hours, I think, could be sufficient. I don't think I'm looking for a lot, or there's probably a lot to be done, but I think it could be a light lift for her.
Yeah, I think for her, it could be a light lift. For the average person navigating that system could be a harder lift, if that makes sense.
And I do think, like, I don't know if she got back to us on the hours of this. I asked that question before, but like number 4, I just don't see, again, like how contractors or grantees will be selected, funds disbursement mechanism. This is going to be an ongoing thing that is going to be bound by state rules and how we establish processes. This is going to stretch long after December. So, I mean, I think maybe a little upfront work from Kim could help, but I think I don't know how many hours were assigned to that bucket, but I think a more immediate use of analysis of the survey would probably be a better use of that time, I think.
So what I'm hearing is that you want included in the language that the interpretation of that survey be in there.
Yes, that's my request. I think that the thing that Dr. Johnson can really help us in the short amount of time that we are privileged for her help is to get us to December, and by December we have heard from the community, both through survey, through public hearing, and through our own process, and at the end of December we have a strategic plan for the next year of our spending priorities. I think she's really well suited to do that.
Okay, so and I also hear Ben, I hear you with, I do believe that it's probably idealistic that she may give us some roads to that grant process. I don't think that certainly will be decided by that point. So I think if I'm hearing people right, we just want to be able to ensure that in this contract, and again, she may come up at requesting more hours to do it. I don't know. That's up to Kim. But in this contract, you're recommending that the words that the data collected within the survey be included in her analysis.
I'm supportive of that. I mean, I think we could add the words analysis of the Recovery Council community survey results to either 1, 2, 3, or 4.
Okay.
And we should, I think you would naturally do this, whoever's going to talk to her. I think we should obviously highlight that for her, not just give her the proposal with the new words in it, which is the only reason why I asked before of whether it's changed from what she submitted, just because I just wanted to make sure we're all working.
Yeah, and Kim, I've known her long enough. If she thinks she can do it, she's going to tell you. If she doesn't think, again, she's going to be honest with you about what she can and cannot do with us. And so at this point, we're recommending with those changes that this contract move forward. Is that what I'm hearing?
Let me just ask, do we think Liz Blackwell Moore is expecting to do that analysis?
I mean, I don't speak for Liz, and Liz is not in the room, but from what I've heard from her is that I have a full-time job and this is a lot, and she hasn't said that she is or isn't.
And okay, so say, and I have a tendency to agree with Courtney on this one. I think that Liz has said pretty much. She's a busy woman, and so I'm amazed that she got that survey out. I mean, it's spectacular, and she did it. and she's a very busy woman. I think if she wanted to do their own analysis with it, we certainly could take Kim's time and say, let's put it on another end of the work that Kim's doing with us and let Liz do it. But
Yeah, and I mean, I think also there's an argument to be made that one single council member shouldn't be analyzing that survey, that it should be an independent person. And there was a few of us that worked on creating the survey, so I don't think I like Liz, but it shouldn't be one individual person.
Yeah.
It's a lot to ask of her.
I completely agree, and I think I would frame it a little differently for the inclusion of this part of the, I actually think Dr. Johnson's, work that she's doing, or the facilitation work to get to a first-year spending plan and just to get some of the stuff off the ground would be incomplete if she didn't do an analysis of the survey. So I actually think it's actually this is gonna be one of the first things that we do as a recovery council, so I think it makes sense to incorporate in fact, it wouldn't be a complete picture of the work that we're doing here the rest of this calendar year without doing it.
And I don't think Liz is gonna be hurt.
Yeah, multiple people we're all gonna be looking at those survey results.
So should we motion, or should we ask her to bring us back another proposal for the full council meeting, or?
I believe the council gave the executive board the go ahead with negotiating a contract. So
That is correct.
yeah, that's what we gave them. So it's up to us to do that. And I would like to get this contract signed and sealed as soon as possible, because she needs to be on a contract to do the work. And we actually are hoping that it's signed and sealed, delivered for the next meeting, because she'll be a big part of that next meeting that we have. So my guess at this point is that we fix the contract to how we like it. We agree to it. At this meeting, we can vote on it, and then move it forward. If it doesn't get signed, then we'll have to come back to the drawing board. But if it gets signed, then we can move forward. But I believe the full council gave us the authority to negotiate this contract.
Okay, so then I will motion to approve this contract with the small caveat that we will include the analysis of the survey in the contract.
Let me, just a quick question, because I have to be the one to finalize this. If Dr. Johnson agrees to do the survey but says it'll cost an additional X amount of money, is that included in are we authorizing that as well? And up to what amount?
I would actually, I would be more comfortable, and I think it makes sense since we talked about it with her, to say something also like at the Recovery Council's discretion, we can emphasize or de-emphasize some of the deliverables, but also defer to you all if you think that, because I do think we can fit this work into the existing scope. And it's an extra sentence. And there was definitely discussion among the full council about that as well.
Okay.
Yep, so my motion stands. I would like to do a motion to approve this contract, adding the survey analysis to the contract as written.
I'll second.
Any further discussion?
I have a few mechanical questions as I do, and I want to slow things down. I sign a lot of contracts at DHHS. We rarely make any payments up front without any deliverables. Almost all of them are deliverables based. There's a small amount up front upon signing of the agreement. Since this is the first contract we're putting forward, it would be unusual to do that, at least from my perspective. The AG's office might have a different opinion. And I also, I feel a little guilty whenever I bring things up like this, which I will get over. But Kim is going to have to fill out vendor paperwork to actually get into the accounting system and actually, so for the finalization of the contract and everything, that is going to take some time. I presume she hasn't started that process yet and that she's not in the system, but the state has separate, the payment schedule, I would just make it a deliverable schedule instead of a payment schedule. We will pay upon delivery of we'll receive information and then pay after that, but the words payment schedule is,
So you,
the state is required to pay businesses within 25 business days, period.
right, so you would say deliverable schedule?
Yes.
Okay.
And do you want to change this upon signing portion?
I would just make all of the payments based on the deliverables.
Okay.
So does that change this motion? Or that's just a conversation about changing the contract? Because Courtney's motion was,
To approve the contract with the addition of the survey analysis.
Okay, do I have to table the motion to edit
For
it,
what?
Brendan?
I think, to be honest, I'm not really sure. I think,
I think the motion can stand with
Yeah.
the points of the discussion added.
Yes.
I think that's,
Courtney can amend her motion.
Okay, I will amend my motion the motion is now that this contract is approved with the 2 edits that we will add the survey analysis to the deliverables, as well as change the word payment to deliverable schedule and move the first payment split between
into a deliverable.
into a deliverable.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? If not, can you call a roll, Harry?
Betsy Fitzgerald,
Yes,
Courtney Gary Allen,
Yes.
Pat Kimball,
Yes.
Ben Mann,
Yes.
And motion carries. Thank you very much. And Ben, I will tell you, I love people who are number people who do detail. They are my favorite people. I always like to serve, anytime I serve on a board, I always know that there's one person I can depend on, and I love it. Good work. All right. So any further discussion before we go into executive session? And then we're going to have a little bit about the logistics of this executive session. All right. So for those members of the public that are listening in, or I don't think there's anybody there in person, but if there's anyone listening in. So at this point, the executive committee will go into executive discussion to discuss personnel issues in regards to the hiring of the new recovery coordinator. So this session will not be public. And Brendan, do we have to come back into public session to take any votes on that or to end the meeting? Or is executive session technically the end of the meeting?
The statute simply requires that, where is it? No contract or other official action may be finally approved at an executive session. I think what's happening with this executive session is the committee is considering the applicants and will make a recommendation to the full council. And so I think that I would not consider that to be, final approval of a contract or an appointment or any other official action. So I think, and I think the bases for being in executive session would still apply to that recommendation. So I think you stay in executive session. When we end executive session, we can come back briefly to say the executive session's over and we're concluding the committee meeting.
Okay. So for
I
my
don't-
own,
So I don't end this Zoom, because I can't go back into it to say those things. So just like mute us and,
Yeah,
so for Betsy and I, we have to leave the Zoom
I can't host both
and then
Zooms.
come back on the Zoom you gave us.
Host the private Zoom with Betsy and Pat, so I can't also host the public webinar at the same time.
Okay.
And if I close out this public webinar, we can't come back to the public with the same Zoom link. We'd have to reissue a Zoom link for the public. to use.
So for all purposes, the meeting of the public is
Laptop
over.
to host the-
Sorry, Haley, what's
So so Betsy and I have to literally leave this meeting and then go on to the one that you provided to us, Haley, right?
Yes, but that's gonna take a second, because I need to go get a second laptop
Here.
to host that
do
one.
you wanna just use mine, or?
I don't know that I can log into my web, I think our Zoom accounts are licensed to our laptop numbers particularly.
yeah.
So can we take like a 5-minute break? And Haley will get a laptop to solve this technological issue.
All right, so Betsy and I are going to leave and go to our other number and get back in the meeting. For those members of the public that are there, thank you very much for attending, and we will get back in about 5 minutes.
Done. Thank you.
All right.
For members of the public who are watching the executive committee meeting of the Maine Recovery Council, due to technical difficulties, we are not going to be able to switch back from executive session to the public session for the purposes of concluding the executive committee meeting. Because there's no other business after the executive session for the executive committee, the committee is going to conclude the meeting of the executive committee within executive session, and we'll be reporting to the council next Tuesday afternoon about the business of the committee. But I want to notify the public that at this time, the public portion of the executive committee meeting will be ending, and the committee won't be coming back after executive session due to technical difficulties. Thank you.